Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the City of Clayton, Ohio Board of Zoning Appeals to order Tuesday, May 7th, 2024 at 7 p.m. First item on the agenda tonight is the swearing in of a new board member, Ronald Johnson. So now we're complete. First thing I'll do is we'll go through and do a roll call.
Mr. McGinnis?
Here.
Ms. Hunter?
Here.
Mr. Madewell?
Here.
Ms. Caldwell?
Here.
And Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Okay. Let me explain the meeting procedures. We have a couple of people in the audience here. Go through the roll call. Would administer the oath to staff and members of the public who wish to speak on an agenda item. We're a quasi-judiciary type of a board, and the appeal for our rulings goes to the Court of Common Pleas, okay? So what we do is we follow a rather strict rules, regulated, all that kind of good stuff. So testimony before us is sworn testimony. I'll be calling the agenda items and ask for staff to present the case. Then we'll ask the applicant if they'd like to add anything to what staff presented. This will be a follow-on of a case that we tabled in January, so we'll be taking it off the table. We'll ask board members if they have any questions to staff or the applicant, and then we'll ask for a motion to open the floor to public comments. Public comments, same sort of thing. We'd like to have the speakers be brief, address the issue at hand, and then we'll go ahead and we'll discuss that too. We'll ask for any other public comments for or against the application. We'll ask the applicant if they'd like to rebut any of the public comments received, so there'll be an opportunity for rebuttal. Ask if there's any further discussion from the board members, and then we'll go through and close the floor for public input, and then ask board members if they'd like to provide a finding of fact for the case. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll ask for a motion and a second to approve with conditions, or disapprove the applicant's request. So that in a nutshell is what we do. That's our format for how we run our meetings. So, anybody wishing to speak in front of the board tonight, please stand and raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give to this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do. I do. Thank you. Again, just as a reminder, we're here to hear a variance case, and our findings are based on what we have in the City of Clayton zoning code. Okay, so that's what we're focused on tonight. Old business then will be, new business, sorry, is the approval of the minutes for the January 2nd, 2024 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. Any additions, corrections, modifications, or input that the board would like to make to the minutes that were distributed electronically to us? Yeah. Okay, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes?
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Then old business. We have a case here, VAR 2401. It's a request for a variance to section 1121.02.I.4 of the Clayton zoning code, specifically requesting to be permitted to place the finished side of a fence in towards the property yard at the property located at 8188 Inwood Drive. The request was made by Mario Sarno, the property owner. This case was tabled at the January 2nd, 2024 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. Do I hear a motion to take this case off the table?
I move to reopen the case just mentioned.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes?
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
And Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Staff, is there any presentation that we'd like to hear tonight, please?
Now it's on. Hello, everybody, welcome. We're going to be presenting application VAR 24-01. This is in regards to 8188 Inwood Avenue, Mario Sarno, for a fence variance. Thanks. So introduction to the application. Application number VAR 24-01 was received on December 11th, 2023, requesting for a variance to section 1121.02.I.4 of the Clayton zoning code, specifically requesting to be permitted to place the unfinished side of a fence out from the property's yard, specifically from the property located at 8188 Inwood Drive. Applicant is Mario Sarno, who is the property owner. Public notice was printed in the Eaton Register Herald on December 20th, 2023. Letters to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property were postmarked on December 13th, 2023. Subject property is 8188 Inwood Avenue. Parcel ID is M60-25101-0001. The area of the property is 0.382 acres, and it is currently zoned MSD. This is in the State Route 49 Main Street District. The proposed location is highlighted here. It's kind of at the center top. You can see it highlighted. And then the surrounding area, you can see that it's RSD on one side of the street and MSD on the other side of the street. That's Main Street. That's over to the far right. The analysis of the request. Applicant desires to be permitted to have his fence along the south property line have the unfinished boards facing out away from his rear yard. The requested variance is from section 1121.02.I.4 of the Clayton zoning code, which states all fences are to be installed with the finished or face side out. If a condition exists on the property that would prevent the owner from reasonably complying with this requirement, the affected fence panels may be installed unfinished side out at the zoning administrator's discretion. The applicant, Mario Sarno, installed a 6-foot privacy fence on his property, fully enclosing the rear yard, sometime in the fall of 2023. The City of Clayton received a complaint from a neighbor concerning the installation of the fence, specifically that the fence was installed along the south property line with the unfinished side of the fence out from the applicant's yard. Upon inspection, Clayton Code Enforcement Officer Dale Swafford issued a violation to Mr. Sarno for installing the fence panels with the unfinished side out towards the property located to the south. After the violation was issued, the applicant spoke to city staff and explained that there was property line dispute, specifically about the location of an existing chain link fence and landscaping plantings on the south property line, which prohibited the applicant from having access to the outside part of the fence and requiring him to install the panels with the finished part of the fence towards his rear yard. Every other side of the new fence has been installed with the finished side out towards the surrounding properties, per the code requirements, including along the north property line, where there is an existing chain link fence similar to the south property line. From a practical standpoint, when staff is asked the question about the location of a fence and/or where a property owner can install a new fence, staff always recommends the fence be installed 3 to 5 feet off the property line to give the property owner the ability to install and maintain fencing per city standards. With that being said, there is nothing in the city's code which prohibits property owners from installing fences directly on a property line. However, when fences are installed directly on a property line, the surrounding property owners do not have to grant access to the property for installation or maintenance of said fence. No matter the status of the property access, all fences are required by code to be installed and maintained per the code requirements. Due to the factors associated with this case, specifically this case is essentially a property line or civil dispute between two property owners, staff did not believe the case warranted an exception to the code requirement of the finished side of the fence facing out from the subject property. Here are a couple of site pictures that our code enforcement officer, Mr. Swafford, took while he was out inspecting. Code guidance to Board of Zoning Appeals for this variance. The applicable code section that addresses general regulations for properties in Clayton with a single-family residential use is 1121.02. Section 1121.02.I.4 regulates fences specific to those single-family uses. In addition, the board should refer to section 1141.07, which outlines the procedures for obtaining a dimensional or locational variance from the development standards in the Planning and Zoning Code. Staff recommendation. After evaluating the applicant's request, staff recommends the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the request variance as submitted, considering the following facts. The request is the result of a property line dispute between two property owners, and the board should weigh this factor when considering the practical difficulty of the request. The property owner installed a fence with the finished side out in compliance with the code along the northern property line, which directly abuts an existing chain link fence, similar to what is existing along the south property line, and the fence could have been installed 3 to 5 feet from the property line, giving the property owner the ability to install the fence finished side out. And that's staff's presentation.
Any questions from the board? Thank you very much. Mr. Sarno, could you come to the podium and say your name and your address? And if there's anything you'd like to add to the presentation that was just made by staff, please.
Mario Sarno, 8188 Inwood, it's Avenue. It's mentioned as drive a couple times in the thing, so it's Avenue. Since we had spoke last, I had said that I would have a survey done of the property because we had question marked where is the property line. When I got my survey, before I even got my survey, the survey people told me that I was over the line in the south side to the rear of the fence. And before I even got the survey, I had dug up each of those posts and relocated them back inside of the property line. Once I had got the survey officially, I held on to it and reviewed it, and it states that the property owner next door, their chain link fence post is on my property. And it's 2 inches on my property. And when you take a string from the point that it's over the line and you string it all the way back to the property corner in the back, where I had said in January, her honeysuckle, it's 3.5 to 4 inches into my property line. The whole issue here was for me to put boards on the outside. I can't put boards on the outside because the chain link is next to my fence. I couldn't put my fence 3 to 5 feet back off the property line so I can maintain it, because if you recall, I added a driveway extension next to my house, as I'm allowed to, and I can't put the fence in the middle of the driveway. It wouldn't be a driveway extension then. So forget which one of you had asked me last if I had confronted my neighbor and tried to talk to them about it. And tax day, I seen them both working out in the yard, the mother and the daughter, and I figured it was a good time a beautiful day to confront and explain the survey. Because this is a stamped survey from the state of Ohio, official, and there's no discrepancy or arguing the point. It is what it is. It is what it says. I explained that the fence was over, and I explained that the honeysuckle pushed even further and further over, and I said I'd given you 7 to 10 days to remove it. Because as the property owner, I'm allowed to remove anything that's over the property line and it's on my property. So I was giving her leeway because she has 3 dogs, I have a dog. And I even said to her I was trying to be a better neighbor and giving her fair warning or fair notice to do so. Well, it's way past April 15th, way past 7 to 10 days later, and there's been no activity or no discussion further. I've tried to discuss it. Well, as a property owner, I want the fence moved, hers off of my side, and the honeysuckle moved off of my side, because as listed on my survey, it's a straight line. Remember we discussed in January, it doesn't go this way, it goes straight. Well, paying for the thousands of dollars survey, I had him put extra pins in the ground. So I have 5 pins on the south side. And I should theoretically be able to run a string from each one of those pins and nothing be in the way of it. I can't do that. So what I've done is I've corrected the section of fence in the back that was over the line so that it runs next to the property line, not on the property line, next to it. And I've sighted both sides of that fence from the back corner to where I finally can't because of said honeysuckle and said fence on over the property line. When I originally built the first section of the fence, the north side and the rear, I went all the way up to her fence thinking that was the property line because it was in the air where the property line was. Ended up being I was not even 6 inches over the property line at that point. So when doing the math, that makes the north side off because I was 6 inches this way on that side, running the same distance made the north side off. Discussed it, same survey with the neighbor, the same April 15th, gave him notice of it. And his comment was, why even bother moving it? I said, because eventually I'd like to sell my house and don't think I would be able to sell it if my fence is in your yard. So I have corrected every section of fence that needed to be corrected. North side is fine. Inside the property line, you can run a string down it from each one of the pins that I paid thousands of dollars for. Now, I feel as property owner, I should be entitled and able to do my fence the same way I did on the north side and I did on the rear side. I should be able to run that string from pin to pin, front to back, and not have anything in my way of putting my fence up to the property line. And it's ridiculous, I feel, that I've spent this much time and this much money on an issue dealing with the fence. So as of now, it's within compliance because the sections I was able to complete have the same thing on either side. She's got boards on her side, I got boards on my side. The sections I haven't been able to complete has that black privacy screen that you've seen in the picture. But it's got it on both sides. So it matches. My side, her side, looks the same thing. But we can't finish the fence, take that black screen down and put boards until the fence is out of my way. The honeysuckle's not in my way. I didn't put it there. I didn't grow it. Since it's been here, January 15th, my grandson was born. I told you back in January it wasn't going to be good. Well, 15 days later, we buried him. These are his ashes that I carry with me every day. So moving that fence on the north side, that was small potatoes compared to the stuff I've been through since January 28th. I'm not coming back to another one of these meetings. Today, it's over. And whether I've got to remove her fence off of my property or she removes it off of my property, one of those two is going to happen. Because I will take nothing but that. Because as a property owner and the taxpayer here, the one who owns the property, not the one who just lives next door, but the actual one who owns it, Those are my rights. And I'll be damned if I'm not going to defend my rights. And I'm sorry if that seems heated, but we explained in January, I forget what the phrase you called me in January. There was not cordial, or I forget what the words you had used. And I explained I'm Italian, so maybe that's not the best. Get heated sometime. But this is over a year dealing with this. And this is just crazy, is the only word I can say. Crazy. And there's enough of that in our world going on right now. And I don't need any more. If you would like to see copies of the survey, I had emailed other pictures, and I don't know, I had emailed them to Emily Snyder.
Yeah, we sent them out.
Okay. Can we go through the pictures that I sent you?
We don't have them on the presentation, but they are printed.
Okay.
Give you a copy if you want to go through them with.
Well,
Well, I do want to remind the board that we're not here to adjudicate the property line. We are here only to discuss the fencing
okay,
issue.
that's fine. I think I said enough.
Thank you, Mr. Sarno. I appreciate that. Are there any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one.
Mr. Sarno, if you could please.
I have a question. So I think I understand it, but I just want to totally get this. You have put finished boards on the outside of the fence facing the south as far as you can go.
As far as I can go.
And your intentions are to put finished boards as soon as that fence is moved and put finished boards
On
on
both
the outside?
sides.
On both sides. So it will be in compliance.
My whole fence is boarded on both sides.
Okay. So it will,
And yes,
Except for where the chain link fence is.
except for the chain link fence. And it will be painted on my side, but it won't be painted on her side. It'll be left raw.
so if the fence is moved, you will finish it, it will be in compliance.
I will move my post
Yeah.
the same way I did on the north side. I will move my post on the south side that are left to be moved up to, but still back off of, the property line, which I had already completed all down the north side and half of the south side. I don't know, half, maybe 40%.
Maybe Ellen, if he does that, he will be in compliance then, right? I guess my question is, I don't see this as more of a zoning variance request if its intent is to complete it to the variance, more of a property line problem. And I don't know how we answer that. I don't know how we can get into that, you know? If you were needing a true variance, that's where we would come in, I guess, but you're not.
Well, the variance I would ask is that if I can't move the fence, her fence, that I should be able to board the rest of the inside of my fence.
It's a matter of moving the fence, right? That's the big deal. That's the big issue. Okay.
For me to be compliance.
I mean, it totally looks like you're trying to do the right things, but I'm just trying to get in my mind, why is this a zoning issue if your intent is to comply with the zoning?
Because I was,
Yeah. Now, I understand where
Trying to complete
yeah, when you came for the first time, but yeah. Am I,
No, and I think the reason that we have this in front of us is because Mr. Swafford wrote wrote you up on a piece of paper saying that it was non-compliant. And I think you talked at the time to Mr. Coons, and Mr. Coons was telling you that if it went through an administrative appeal, it'd be denied. So you said, or you guys just, decided to put it in as a variance. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, and that's why it's in front of us. But you're right, Mr. Meadwell, and again, we're focused here strictly on the compliance of the fence. If there's a dispute when it comes to the property line or anything along those lines, we don't adjudicate that at all. However, it's good to have the neighbor here because what we like to do is try to work with you guys. We're not a mentoring group. Okay, but by the same token, we'd like to make sure that at least these facts are on the table during our discovery. And I appreciate, the comments that you made, sir, when it came to, the grief that you've been through this year and the frustration that I know that you're going through with this fence because everything else is great except for 40 feet. And and I understand that. But I don't know, if we'll be able to reach that decision based on what we come through tonight.
That's fine. I'll
Okay,
do
and
it myself.
again, I appreciate that. Any other comments from the board? Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you again. Okay. Do I hear a motion then to open up the floor to public comments?
I'll make a motion to open the floor.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. Any public comments for or against the application? Yes, ma'am, if you could come up to the podium and state your name and your address, please.
Hi. My name is Nancy Keel. I am the daughter, caretaker, and POA of my 96-year-old mother, Sandra Keel, who owns 8178 Inwood Avenue. Her property borders Mr. Sarno's fence at 8188 Inwood Avenue. I am here to represent my mother and are concerned for her property. I want to try to be brief as the work on the fence has begun and is half finished. I want to, here's a picture of where it's at today. That picture was taken today? Okay, that picture was taken today. I believe the only thing that needs to happen here is for us to interpret the survey, and I think that what you're talking about with the fence needing to comply, and that you're not going to necessarily help us with the survey. I'm just going to go ahead and read what I've proposed, and then we can go from there.
Feel free.
I wanted to say that there are no survey pins on my mother's side of the fence. I spoke to the survey, here, here's I think some of these you've got. There are no survey pins on my mother's side of the fence. I spoke to the surveyors the second day that they came out to Mr. Sarno's property and invited them onto my mother's property if they needed to access it. They said they had to make adjustments to their calculations. This is when they realized Mr. Sarno had been 6 inches into my mother's property at the far fence at the back of the property. So you can see that fence, the pin where it's 6 inches away from my mother's chain link fence. I also called Mr. Luis Riancho, Mr. Sarno's surveyor from Luis G. Riancho and Associates and Company. I asked why none of the pins that he set on are on my mother's property. He said that the only place my mother's fence is on Mr. Sarno's property is where the front post straddles both properties equally into properties equally at the front gate, post gate. In the back of the property, Mr. Sarno's fence was 6 inches into my mother's yard. He also said that he could not speak to the location of the pins because Mr. Sarno is his client. If you follow the plumb line forward to the front fence where my mother's fence straddled the pin, you can see that the plumb line between the back fence pin and the front fence pin over the black tarp fence is tight. This is because Mr. Sarno has built his fence right into my mother's fence, causing it to lean. His black fence is in the way of the plumb line moving toward the front property line. Several weeks ago, Mr. Sarno came over onto my mother's property while we were outside gardening. He gave us the survey drawing and said that he had contacted Ellen Snyder and that because my mother's fence was on his property, Ellen told him that we had 5 to 7 days to tear down our side of the fence or he would do it based on the survey. When I contacted Ms. Snyder from zoning, she said, quote, "We have not advised Mr. Sarno to take down any fence. The removal or damage of any property is a civil matter," end quote. Also, if you look at the back fence, prior to Mr. Sarno being informed by the surveys that he was actually on my mother's property, Mr. Sarno had stacked literally a ton of wood against my mother's fence, causing my mother's fence to break. Once Mr. Sarno realized he was on my mother's property, he removed the wood, but has not repaired the fence. I contacted Daryl Swayford from the zoning department back in October of 2023. He consulted with Jack Kuntz. They both agreed that the black screen Mr. Sarno had employed for the fence was not up to code, and the fence should be flipped. We are 7 months later, and I asked that my mother's chain link fence stay exactly where it is and where it was built long before my mother moved to the house. Mr. Sarno fixes the broken fence at the far end of my mother's property and finishes flipping the fence to smooth side out so that we can all move on. I will say that I will gladly remove the honeysuckle, which I think is a problem, and cut it to the trunk, but I wanted to go to this meeting and just state that I will be doing that. And there's also I think it's it's another mulberry bush there as well that I will also remove. So, but I'm, glad to do that, but I think that what we're talking about, and even if you look at the survey, it says that the pins are to the north of the aluminum fence. So it's not on my mother's property, it's not on the fence, it's just that this can be resolved, but I don't think that my mother moving her fence is going to be the answer. I think it just needs to flip the fence and be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Keel. I appreciate your input. Any questions or comments from the board? No, ma'am. If you could.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. I tend to ask questions at
Oh,
times.
okay.
I know that in our first meeting, we talked about that a little bit, and then I know that honeysuckle is really invasive. And
Yeah.
it can go, it's almost like water. It can go anywhere.
Right.
So getting rid of that is going to be, I think, a big plus. Okay.
Absolutely agree.
Mulberries, bushes, and trees are about the same way.
Right.
So that's a good thing. We did hear at the time of, because just flipping the fence is going to be almost impossible. It's the way the fence is constructed, I believe. And I think what Mr. Sarno really needs is to have access to be able to put the boards up on her side. Of course, we can discuss that and talk about that and see if that's a viable option. But do you have any problem with allowing him to get on your property to be able to make any repairs, any fixes, and
I
any
do not. I
construction?
actually had given Mr. Sarno my phone number when he first started the fence, and I was surprised when the black screen went up. I did invite him to come onto I knew that was actually part of, in zoning codes, that he had 10-foot access to the property. I was trying to understand what I was reading up there, that he actually doesn't, but he's, you're more than welcome, Mario, to come onto the property and do the fence, because I saw that he labored, while he was doing the first part of the fence. So I'm absolutely fine with him coming on, just as long as I know so that I can put my dogs away and that they're not going to interrupt his work.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that
absolutely.
comment. I know that in cases like this, and again, we're not here to look at a civil matter, and we're not going to be able to make any decision on a civil matter
Right.
of, fences, property lines, and whatever.
Right.
We're simply looking at the code, and we're saying, it isn't compliant. But if there's a way that we can perhaps, open up a little dialogue so that we can make that happen, then I think we'll all be happy.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. It's not necessarily confrontation, but cooperation and a little bit of understanding, I think would go a long way. Now, and that's neither here nor there again. We're not a mediation group either.
Yeah.
But I would like to be able to work with you guys, if possible, to at least get that dialogue started. And if maybe this is a step in that direction.
Okay.
So I appreciate your attendance tonight. We missed you in January.
Actually, the January meeting was canceled and then rescheduled, and I saw it on the on the website that it had canceled, and so I didn't attend, so
Yeah,
it was.
well, I know
it
we
was-
had one canceled due to the threat of weather, and we got the same thing going tonight.
Right, exactly.
A little
It's-
bit different.
yeah.
But the initial application.
Yeah, I wish I
changed.
was here as well.
That would have been good. I mean, it would maybe have helped a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I appreciate your comments,
Absolutely.
and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Sarno?
First of all, in January, I believe I explained to you and even showed you pictures that the honeysuckle had pressed so far, so hard against the fence, the whole length of it, that her fence had coming apart in the rear. The same section that she's accusing me now of tearing up and wanting me to fix. No, I never broke your fence.
No, again.
The honeysuckle,
Again,
broke your fence.
I understand. I understand.
I didn't break
But
the chain link.
I understand that, but what I want to do is I want to try to see if there's any, your thoughts.
There's no way to side boards on her side without the fence of hers listed on here over the line. Even says here, exterior fence, face of her pole, 0.15 of a foot. Works out to, let's call it 1 3/4, 2 inch. Because it lists my post that's next to her post, listed as 0.2 clear, meaning I've got 2.5 inches. I'm off the property line. If I had 3/4 of that 2.5 inches, I'd be able to put boards on the outside of my fence. If her fence didn't start on my side, I would be able to complete the project. The chain link, at least, would have to come off from the corner to the honeysuckle. That would give me room to put boards down.
Okay,
Because the chain link is on this side of her post.
Right.
So therefore, the chain link is even more into my yard.
Understand. Now, with that in mind, let's pause right there for just a second. Ms. Q, could you come up to the podium? I think what Mr. Sarno's saying is that the chain link is close, okay? But it's too close. He can't get the thickness of that board in there to be able to complete that side. Am I right?
I've tried it.
Okay, I'm right. So perhaps it would be possible to take a look at that fence, perhaps adjust the chain link or move the chain link, take it off, or somehow, get that
The
shoe.
front section of chain link from her mom's house to our fence.
Yeah.
And she could remove the chain link from inside there to the honeysuckle that she's already going to remove. And to remove the honeysuckle, she's going to have to cut her chain link
Well, that-
because it's grown through the chain link.
And Ms. Keel already said that she's gonna do that.
So,
So
yes.
if that happens,
I can put boards on
you
both
can put
sides.
boards on both
Without
sides.
moving any posts, she could leave the post on my property.
Okay, time
and I'll
out,
be-
time out, sir, time out. So what he's saying is that he might be able to modify your fence to do work that you're gonna be doing anyway, right? To be able to get rid of the mulberry and the honeysuckle. Make that adjustment. He can then board his side of the fence, okay, to make it compliant. Now, what's that do to the fence? Well, you have a chain link fence there to try to keep your dogs in and keep you out, but it's going to be boarded up all through that area anyway. You're not going to lose anything if the chain link is going to be gone, unless you've got a Pekingese or a Chihuahua or something, little tiny that, well, but I'm thinking that if he can get his work accomplished, we're done here, and you guys can be happy again.
Well, yeah, that's not going to happen. But, no, see, I think what I spoke to my mother about removing the chain link on that side, and she does not want to do it. because her property has chain link fence all the way around it. She wants to keep it. And so somehow we're going to have to work with the fact that that chain link fence is there. Now, Mr. Sarno moved, once he realized that he had, that his posts were on my mother's property, he dug those posts out. And so all those pins are on the north side of my mother's fence, meaning that her property, her fence is not on his property. And so he needs to move those 4x4s back so that he can get access to putting the wood behind, and he can access it through my mother's property. That's fine. We don't have any problem with that. Again, the chain link fence, or this honeysuckle and mulberry would be gone. I disagree with that the fact that a honeysuckle that is, 40 feet away from the corner, broke it when you look at the logs, but, since this is not what we're here about a fence, then that's, but he can certainly move his 4x4s so that he can get behind without moving the fence. Because again, if you look at where the pins are located, my mother's fence is not on his property. It's just not there. So, I don't know what else to say. I'm willing to take the honeysuckle out, willing to take the mulberry out, and willing to give access to Mr. Sarno to my mother's property.
Okay.
So
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Again, thank you very much for your comments.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Mr. Sarno? Having heard that, do you have any options in mind?
I would like to show one of the pictures that I had emailed that shows her fence over the line with the pin in the ground and the mark from the guy that did it. Because that's a lie.
Is it on your phone?
It's, yeah, it would be on my phone too. Let me.
So this is what they all have, if you want to tell them what page it's on, they can all flip through it.
That post is over the line. Okay, so that takes care of that scenario. And like I said, she could leave that post there. All I gotta do is take the chain link down that goes from there to the honeysuckle. Because you're gonna have to cut how many feet of the chain link anyway to remove the honeysuckle that's growing literally through it. Yeah, I would be, as a compromise, you can leave that post there. Leave the front of your house closed in, fine. But I can't put boards on that side with the rest of the, well, and besides the point that this picture proves the post is on my side, you got to think it starts there, and I should be able to run that same string to the next pin. Can't.
We're not talking property line.
Yep.
We're not, we're
But
just
to
talking
satisfy
compliance.
everybody, I could board the side, but I'm just saying again, it's not possible in this scenario.
Can't do it.
Tried it.
Can't do it, okay. And not even shoehorning it in somehow, or?
I've tried to put a board down in between. There's no putting the board in between because the post, if it's 2 inches on my side, it's got a post. And then the chain link hangs out here off the outside of that post. So that's even further.
Here's another thought, Mr. Sarno. You seem like a pretty handy guy.
Yeah.
If Ms. Keel were to ask you nicely, would you consider relocating her post in a little bit to make a little room so that you could reside the side of your fence?
I would have done that. I would have made her
Thank-
compliant.
Thank you. Now,
I would
now,
move her fence post over to where it should be,
having heard that, Ms. Keel,
and that would give me more than enough room.
I just heard a concurrence from your neighbor. Does that sound good? Could you do that?
If I get to move it back so that we're both sharing the property line, not one of us over,
I understand that. I understand that.
because the way to move her post, being a contractor for a living, I can't exactly move her post in and then set my post. I want to move mine too. If I'm moving hers, I'm going to get 2 inches extra on my gate. Backing a trailer into this driveway, I want that extra 2 inches. She removes her honeysuckle. I continue straight down that line. Everybody's happy.
And
I don't have to back my trailer in at an angle. I can back it straight.
And again, I've heard a commitment tonight that Ms. Keel would be wide open to doing that. Does that
That's the
sound-
only scenario. That's all that's left. That's all
Right.
that can be done at this
Right.
point.
And does that sound like a reasonable compromise to you? And I think then that we'd be compliant.
But I'm making let's get back to what we agreed to here. I'm going to make her post on the front, her front section from my fence to her house, I'm going to make that compliant. I'm not making the other 60 feet of her fence compliant.
I hear you.
Yeah, I'll make sure that your dogs don't get out, because I don't want my dog to get out either. My dog enjoys running up and down the fence with her 3 dogs. Mine won't bark, but hers bark constantly. And I haven't complained to anybody about that. But yeah, I would make the front section, being word here, I will make that section compliant. But I'm not going to make the remaining compliant so that I can move my fence
That's
up
not,
to
that's,
the property
that's
line?
not what we're talking about, and that's not why we're here,
Okay,
right?
yes.
Roger that. Ms. Keel?
Well, Mr. McGinnis, so I'd hate to be the Debbie Downer in the room, but we don't have any mechanism to enforce any agreement that is agreed to in this room. And I think that it is probably best if we look at just the facts that are presented to the case. And I completely understand the desire to mediate this case and to try to make, a harmonious relationship over on Inwood and everybody's happy. But I think that we are wading into territory that we probably shouldn't wade into.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So you see, this is what happens when you get a couple of guys that are trying to be nice and try to get things together, see? But I do understand exactly what she's talking about. We're here to discuss the variance on your fence for your property. However, I think maybe we've opened the door so that maybe you two can have discussions and get things squared away. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And thank you very much for getting me back on track here.
I completely get what you're doing. I really do.
All right. Any other comments? Do I hear a motion to close the floor for public comments?
Move to close the floor for public comments.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion on the board about this case? This is an interesting case.
I'm
Mr.
confused.
Johnson, there'll be a test after this.
I'm confused as to why would we even be voting on a variance when there's not one proposed that I see. Yeah, there's one.
We do have a variance proposal in front of us, and that variance says, to allow an unfinished fence. That's the variance.
I believe it's listed that if it's not possible to put them on the outside. I believe that's how it's listed.
But we're going back to questioning him but your intent is to make it all compliant if you can.
I want it to match
So,
the rest
and
of my
And how much is 60% compliant now, 70%? How much of the fence has got double boards on it now, on that south side?
There's about 350 feet of my fence around the back of the house, and there's like 60 of it that's not fenced.
And that's on her side, it says, half, about
This
halfway.
side of the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, the variance itself is looking to, specifically requesting to be permitted to place a finished side of a fence in toward the property's yard at the property located at 8188 Inwood. So that's what the request was for. Whereas the code's saying it's got to be finished on the outside.
The issue that I have, if I'm, and I'm not taking any sides, believe me, I see both your points are valid points. My point is, if I'm a neighbor, I would not want half the fence finished and half unfinished. And so that's, therein lies the problem to me, is if we give him a variance to half the fence, I don't know that that's a.
Personally, I don't want to set the precedent. So, you know, the code is the way it's supposed to be, and we're regulators and caretakers of the code, period. Thoughts on the board?
I'm wondering, so we have to decide whether to grant or not grant this variance. How long, if the variance is not granted, how much more time does the applicant have to get into compliance?
Not indefinite. I don't think that there's anything particularly spelled out in the code. Typically, we do 30-day increments. As long as applicant is communicating with the city, we tend to, work with them.
So just for the sake of closing out this matter that's been open since January, we should probably make a decision.
Any thoughts? I know that, again, we're to follow the code, the zoning code. And following the code, the zoning code, the way it sits right now, this variance, to me, should be denied. I think what we did, though, is we at least broached the subject a little bit and got the neighbors talking a little bit. Hopefully, they can come to a conclusion. Otherwise, if we're talking property line, I'm afraid it's something that has to go to another court. We can't go outside of that jurisdiction of what we're talking here, and we're talking tonight zoning code and how this fits, yay or nay, black or white. It's either 1 or 0, one of the two. So that's what we're going to be deciding on this evening. It's nothing, one way or another. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. But hopefully, you two can reach a reasonable conclusion to this. I think that Mr. Sarno has done a fine job on what he's done, what he's constructed. I know that he talked to us in January about his property. He needs to back his trailer in there. And, he's done a lot of work to make sure that all this will work out okay. And then we come down to a property line dispute. And we can't talk about that here. We don't do that. We don't rule on that in one way, shape, or form. All we're ruling on is the construction of the fence. So I hope you understand that. Well, any other discussion from the board members? If not, I'm going to go through and read the Findings of fact for the case. The findings of fact deal with the testimony that we've heard, the issues specifically to the fence itself. There's several different conditions. I'll go through and read them for a variance, and these are the conditions for standards of a variance here from the City of Clayton. Item 1, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved and are not applicable to any other land, structure, or building within the same zoning district. I tend to disagree. Property line dispute between the two property owners, and that was all part of what we were talking about tonight. That's not peculiar to the land, structure, or existing buildings on the property where the fence is located. We do have unique conditions that we've talked about a little bit with the bush, with the honeysuckle, and with the abutting fence. However, a precedent's already been made that we can indeed put that fence right on the property line, and it is able to be put next to a chain link fence, as Mr. Sarno, the applicant, has demonstrated. However, I disagree with item number 1. Comments from the board? Number 2, a literal interpretation of the planning and zoning code would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other property owners in the same zoning district under the same provisions of the planning and zoning code. I'm going to disagree from the fact, and there's mitigating factors on this, but the fence in question could have been installed, and it has been stated in staff when the staff made the presentation that the suggestion was that the fence be put further on the property line to allow enough room. Nevertheless, we've heard testimony from Mr. Sarno that he has used that land appropriately for a driveway that he has so that he can back his trailer into his backyard, which again is a good thing. So there's conflicting evidence along those lines. Apparently, we have discussed a little bit about the moving of the fence slightly to be able to make adjustments. Again, we're talking about a property line discussion here, something that we're not ruling on, but we do have findings of fact on. And hopefully, Mr. Sarno can adjust that, make some adjustments, and then get the fence set up properly with the approval of Ms. Keel. And again, when it comes to the actual property line itself, we're not talking about that. That needs to be vetted as a civil dispute if it ever comes up again, rather than a variance. Comment from the board? Item 3, special conditions and circumstances do not result from an action of the applicant. I would disagree with that. The applicant installed the fence with the finished side out, sure, in compliance with the code along the perimeter of the backyard, except for the side on the south neighbor, and only that part that he could not access. And we've discussed that access tonight a little bit. So hopefully that will give Mr. Sarno some relief there. The applicant did receive approval from the north neighbor and installed the fence in compliance with the code, directly abutting an existing chain link fence. So we know that can happen. We know that that can happen if he has enough room and if there's enough, space to be able to work that. Again, with the complexity of the lot line, okay? And then, again, we're not addressing that. The applicant installed the fence prior to receiving a violation of noncompliance, was subsequently generated the request for this variance to begin with. And that was variance VAR 2401. So all this action preceded the filing of this variance. So this was at the direct action of the applicant. Comments on the board? Item 4, granting the variance will provide the minimum relief necessary to alleviate practical difficulties the applicant is experiencing. I disagree with that. Granting the variance will set a precedent which would allow further installation of fences which would not be compliant with the code. Additionally, the property line discussion falls outside of the scope and regulation of the zoning code and should be addressed as a property line civil dispute. if it needs to go further. Comments from the board? Item 5, granting the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the Planning and Zoning Code and will not cause damage or harm to the neighborhood or otherwise be detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare. I'll disagree with that for the same comment as I made with item 4. Proposed variance, item 6, the proposed variance will not constitute a change of zoning district, including variation in use on the official zoning map. In no case shall the board approve a variance for use which is not a permitted use in a zoning district in which the land, structure, or building is located. I disagree with that. Granting the variance will set a precedent for the code of noncompliance, reference section 1121.02.I.4 of the City of Clayton zoning code. In addition, granting this request for variance would require this Board of Zoning Appeals to pass quasi-judicial judgment on a property line civil dispute, which is outside of our charter of responsibility. Comments from the board? And item 7, other relevant factors that may assist the board in weighing and balancing the public and private benefits and harms to determine if the requested relief is necessary, with the exception that no nonconforming use of neighboring lands, structured or buildings in the same zoning district, and no permitted or nonconforming use of land, structures, or buildings in any zoning district shall be considered justification for approval for the requested variance. And I think this is not applicable. However, if we do set a precedent, somebody may come in and ask for it, so. Based on the above, do I hear a motion?
I move that we deny the request for variance 24-01.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes?
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
And Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sarno, thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your patience. Ms. Keel, thank you. I appreciate your time and patience and your understanding too. I really hope you guys can get this resolved. Thank you again. Okay, new business. Do we have anything coming up?
Yes, in June.
Great. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye.